Slicing refers to extracting part of the data. For example, let's type this. Full name equals James Bond. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to slice, meaning extract information. So let me type this in high-speed mode, and I'll explain what this means. Okay, so what we did was we got the full name James Bond, and now we're going to pull out of this just the first name. So the way we do that is we say full name, and then here in brackets, we do 0 to 5. Now, it's a little bit confusing because you think that 0 to 5 means 6 numbers, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'll get back to why we start with 0 in a second. But let me first of all type the last name now. Okay, let's run this, and then I'll explain exactly what we just did here. Run. The name is James Bond. Okay, let's talk about the first name up here first, which is James. Notice how we started at 0 and not 1? Why is that? Because Python starts counting at 0. Let me say that again. Python starts counting at 0. And this makes sense. But then you might think, why did you include the 6 numbers, meaning 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Well, James is 5 characters, not 6, so this doesn't seem to make sense. Well, you tell Python to include characters, then when you start at position 0, it means include position 0, but don't include the last position. What does that mean? Well, full name here, we wrote 0 to 5, means start at the first position, which is 0, not 1, and then include everything except the last character, which is the 6th character. So it doesn't include this. It goes this up to, but not including this, just the way that Python works. Now, this will make more sense if we add Y to the end of James here. Okay, and before I run the code, please do not look at the last name, meaning Bond. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this. Okay. And we see here that Python still only printed the first 5 characters of James, but not the Y, which would be the next character after that. Let's run the code again, but this time let's change the 5 to 6. And again, please do not look at Bond up here yet, which means you're probably looking at it because I am. All right, let me run this. Okay, so now we know that when we tell Python when slicing, we start at 0, and then whatever the last character is, we do not include. So let me ask you a question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the code from ending at character 6 to ending at character 4. Okay, now what do you think is going to happen? What do you think the output will be? So let me change this here to 4. Okay, let me run. Okay. Well, what happened was we got just the first 4 characters here, which is James. And we get that because Python, again, starts counting at 0 and doesn't include the last number. So if we change this back, let me get rid of the Y here. If we change this back to 5 here and we run the code again, it'll just pull out James here in the first name. Great. We just trained our minds to think like Python. So you start at 0 and don't include the last character. Well, the reason this is the case is because computers, whenever they count, they look at how many numbers away from the first number is the digit here. And this is important to discuss. And computers think in terms of arrays. Now, an array is a collection of numbers like 6, 3, 4. And when a computer looks at the array of numbers, in our example, 6, 3, 4, the computer thinks the number 3, the middle one, is one movement to the right of the first number. And with our array example of 6, 3, 4, the computer thinks that number 4 is 2 places away from number 6. So with this example of James here, 0.5 means the letter A in James, right here, the letter A in James is 1 position away from the letter J. And the letter S here in Bond, or in James, is 4 positions away from the letter J. 1, 2, 3, 4. So when we type here 0 to 5 with the first name here, the computer reads it that as show me position 0, which is J here, okay, but up to, but not including 5 movements away from J. So the number means offset. 0 offset means J. A offset means 1. And 2 offset, meaning 2 movements, 1, 2, means M. Great. So we understand what 0 to 5 means right here. Let's move on to the last name, which is Bond. Now, the space between James and Bond is 5 characters away from J in James. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So this means the B in Bond is 6 characters away from J. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if we want to reference all 4 letters in Bond, we start at 6 right here, and we want to include characters 7, 8, and 9, meaning these 4 characters right here. Now remember that Python doesn't count the last number. So in order to reference characters 6 through 10, we type 6 through 10 right here. And we have to think like computers do. And when it comes to slicing, there's other ways to get the same response. For example, if we deleted the 0 in the first name right here, and we ran this, it would still work. Why? Because Python reads this right here. Let me just delete this. Python reads this right here as get me the first 5 characters, not including the 5th one. Remember, we always start at 0. Similarly, with the last name, if we remove the 10, then Python is smart enough to know that it means start at 6 and then end at the very end here. Let's try this out. Okay, and it works. Great. Now, what if we wanted to only print the first letter of the first name? What do you think we would put in square brackets? We would put 0. So let's run this. The name is J Bond. What if I wanted the second character? What do you think we type? We type 1. The name is A Bond. There we go. Now, we can write this the same way by typing +1, because 1 is positive 1. So let me show you here. So if I go here +1 and we run it, it's the same thing. Now, what if we only wanted to get the last letter of James Bond? Well, what we would do is we would type here -1. So let me show you that. -1 here. D Bond. The very end here, D. Now, the best way to learn this stuff is to keep experimenting and play around with the code.